Mr. Speaker, their response to why there was the capacity for internal change within churches was simply to say that discussion doesn't exist, and if it does, people don't listen. That is empirically false and offensive. The reason why the Catholic Church has changed its policy on contraception in certain circumstances is because of the long fight of feminists within that church who wanted to create change and were willing to prioritise that change and stay within that religion because they cared about that religion. But even those women who say, I am a feminist, but I have not, on behalf of the fact that I am a woman, inherited any special obligations to other women, if they choose to prioritise the religious value and significance they get, we're happy to defend them on societal position. 3 questions in this speech. Firstly, do women have an obligation, principally, to leave these churches? Secondly, is there capacity for internal change? And thirdly, how in the institutional structure of religion handle people outside of that particular structure? So, Beck's opening was to say that religion is more prescriptive about your life. Religion dictates to you how you must live your life, and therefore it's a bad thing. For one thing, their very case was premised upon prescribing to people how they should live their lives. That is, that they should leave the churches. But more to that, we would like to say every single ethical system sets for you some boundaries about how you live your life. The fact that one sets more boundaries does not make that more illegitimate as a system of belief. Like, you can opt into more restrictions on your liberty, as many as you want to. We didn't think that level of prescriptiveness was ever determinative of, like, falsehood or evilness. The second basis they gave for the principal worseness of religion as opposed to feminism was that the basic argument behind feminism had not changed over time, but the basic argument behind religion was changing. 1. Religious structures have existed for long periods of time and have resisted a lot of change. This also runs counter to a lot of the opposition's analysis on the mechanism principle. They're saying that religions are unwilling to change. But more importantly, our response to this was whether your position changes does not actually mean that your position is illegitimate. Like, the fact that feminists believe in equality does not mean that their position is necessarily superior to other ethical systems that do develop over time. They never established why that necessarily meant that we should think it was a more legitimate cause. The next religion they gave is that women who say in these religions do harm to other women in their religions, and they have a special obligation to them. That feminism always uses women as battering rams. A couple of responses about that. 1. We conceive of feminism as about the agency and choice of women. We would like to say on this side of the house that feminism believes that women should be able to make rational choices about their own life. We think the opposition undercuts feminism in its entirety when it says that women have special obligations to other women. But secondly, it's differential obligations on the basis of your gender. Feminism hates that. It's saying you're a man, you have no obligation to leave the church. You're a woman and you're a feminist because you've come to these particular conclusions, and you now have an obligation to leave the church. Why is feminism putting a differential obligation on women that operates in their disfavour? But thirdly, how much do you cede by virtue of the fact that you begin to buy into the idea of feminism? The very fact that you believe in feminism does not mean that you cede your liberty in all other aspects of your life. Otherwise, there'd be a strong disincentive to never ever identify as a feminist or believe in that ideology if you had to sacrifice everything else when that came along. Second question, the capacity for internal change. And this was the bulk of Beck's speech. She wanted to say people don't listen within these churches. As I told you in my introduction, that is empirically false. People do listen within these churches. And as I will talk to you later, they are more likely to listen when you can talk on their terms within that religion, using those religious structures and using the discourse that religion believes in and has opted into, rather than when you leave that religion and laugh at them from your atheist high point. They also want to say that the church uses its feminist membership as in its public face as arguments for why its positions are feminist. That is obviously false. Insofar as a feminist within that church disagrees with the sexist doctrines of that church, why would they be like, oh, she's in our church, yes, she disagrees with the stuff, but she's in our church? That would be quite unpersuasive for the general place of that religion. They can only use the feminists if they are agreeing and falling into line with the rest of the church doctrine. We told you why there are many circumstances where they wouldn't necessarily fall into line, and that we weren't going to penalise them for doing so. They wanted to say that there's non-feminists in these churches who are harmed by the model. As I said earlier, we also don't think they have any special obligation to these non-feminists. But also, if these women endow the other women in their churches with agency, and because they are feminists and believe those women are equal, why would they believe the only way they can't persuade them by talking to them one-on-one in that church community? Why would they think they'd never be able to rationally make their mind be altered to come around to their feminist perspective within that church? We never understood why that would be the case. They wanted to say where they want to say that these women are more likely to become feminists in a circumstance where they leave, where they exclude themselves from the church when they see this mass exodus from those communities. Why was that untrue? One, the message is far less targeted when you, rather than saying, we object to these principles and I'll tell it to you one-on-one, they instead just leave the church. We think the message is also diluted because lots of people leave the church for lots of reasons. They're not likely to ask questions about why you in particular left your religion. They're just likely to say, you decided it was too hard for you to follow the religion and you decided to leave like all the other people who become atheist shirkers. Now, third question, like me. Third question. Why church hierarchies are more responsive to the points of views within their church rather than outside. And this is critical to the debate. This would be my substantive. So, one, why they are more responsive than when you leave those religions. A couple of reasons. One, women outside the religion do not engage in the discourse of that religion as effectively because they lose the capacity to be able to use biblical texts as their basis or theological doctrines or traditions as their basis in that discourse because they're not engaged in that discourse as often. Secondly, there's a massive incentive for that church structure to not respond to this type of pressure because the second you start becoming dependent on the approval of your entire constituency, one, you lose the legitimacy which is based on the authority and tradition of their religion, but two, you look open to any change of modernity that's possible. So one of the big things about Catholicism is they want to be a bulwark against modernity. The second they open their gates up to one form of modernity because of an outside pressure, there's a huge, they know that the correlative of that will be that more forms of pressure will begin to come in, which means they never have an incentive to change when people from outside try to change them. Also, the opponents to religion often ridicule religion from the outside, and so it's much more easy within that religion to cast any person who's outside that religion as ridiculing them and associate them with the left-wing intelligentsia who already thinks religion is stupid, and so those views never have as much power in changing the institutional structures within those religions. Next alternative, what if they move to more liberal religions, which the opposition have wanted to rest their hat on throughout this debate? One, churches don't often engage community to community between churches. So you're not likely, if you're a left-wing Baptist, to be able to convince people who are right-wing Baptists about your particular positions on religious doctrines, because those communities often engage only on a head-to-head basis. Insofar as we buy into the opposition analysis about why the institutional structure of religion are male at the top, the people who are communicating there are effectively the male. You staying within that religion is going to be more effective because within that community you can change more females' minds and you're more able to engage with that community's entirety on a community-to-community level. Second thing, churches often have histories of antagonism between each other, which means they don't want to listen to each other at all. So for instance, the Protestant Reformation, Anglican Reformation, there is a series of steps that meant that in most new religions, since we don't just have a perfect lubricated marketplace of religions, most religions often dislike each other and actively reject any ideas that come from other religions in that society. They can just put them at hand as being a bad religion who don't represent Christianity or any doctrines behind that. Thirdly, the institutional power of religion is often based on structures that pre-exist that. So, for instance, Catholicism draws a lot of its legitimacy from the fact that it is the oldest form of Christianity in the world, and from the fact that it is the most established and broad form of Christianity in the world. When you leave that structure, you lose the power of having the largest mobility once you want to achieve those benefits. Fourthly, they wanted to just say, well, you can always just uproot and join a more liberal church, and you can get all the same benefits there from your community and culture and family. There's a bit of a coordination problem here, Mr. Speaker. When you leave your church because you're a feminist woman, and a man within that church decides to continue to stay in that church, who is your husband, you're never going to be able to get the benefits of the family. Or if the rest of your parents or history don't choose to leave that church, those benefits don't accrue. Mr. Speaker, because we would endow feminists with the power to make choices about how they live their lives, and if that means staying in a church, we're happy to defend that. We're proud to oppose.